When I was a young boy in Great Falls, Montana, I would listen for hours to my father's 78 RPM collection of piano concertos. I had a dream. I wanted to be a concert pianist. When I was in the third grade, we moved from Great Falls down to Butte, a rough, tough, ugly mining town with a reputation and an attitude. My mother wasn't too gung-ho for it because her friends in Great Falls said that it was a horrible place to move and raise a family. We moved into a rental house, a turn-of-the-century Victorian, and one day, when I was helping Mom prepare dinner, I was mixing the pudding over the hot, black cast iron wood stove. And as I stirred it, it started to burn on the bottom. "You friggin' astard, Bay! You dirty son of a bitch, Bay! Blankety blank, blank, blank!" These were words that I'd learned from my friends, new words. I didn't know what they meant, but Mom did. "Where did you learn that filth?" I told her a truth. When I ate dinner at Jimmy Yasonovich's last week, that's the way his parents talked. Well, they may say that in their family, but those words are never, ever to be used here. And so I stopped using them, at least in front of Mom. On October 28th, 1950, as I was walking home from school, I had an epiphany that a copper thing that was a cylinder about the size of my finger and had two wires sticking out of it, that I had found in the garage that we'd rented and had a bunch of the landlord's junk in there. I thought that it might be an electromagnet. So I came home, ran upstairs to my room, took a dry cell battery, and connected one of the leads up, and then the other one. And then, blam! The blast rocked the neighborhood. It was really a dynamite cap. And with my ears ringing and through the putrid smoke, I took a peek at my hand, and I saw clean white bones protruding from 3 fingers. When the bandages came off a month later, I decided that my whole dream of being a pianist didn't make sense anymore. So I decided to change my dream and my instrument. It was easy to change because I didn't know how to play the piano yet. So I started just listening to a different set of concertos. And so every day I would hold up my imaginary violin with broad strokes of my imaginary bow and bow to an imaginary audience. And then when at the end of the record came the cheers, applause, bravos, I would bow deeply and suck in the adulation. Now, my mom knew of that dream of becoming a virtuoso on the violin. And one day, on my 11th birthday, she said, "This is your grandfather Sylvester Fauch's violin. He learned how to play it in the 1890s. If he wanted you to have it, if you learn to play it well, it will become your ticket to college." Now, I knew my parents didn't have enough money to send me to college, so I began in earnest to work on my dream and earn my ticket to college. I began by studying the E string. I overheard my parents one night, "George, he plays like an angel." "Genevieve, I can't stand that screeching." Okay, he didn't say that. However, I had a sense, and I knew what they felt, because whenever I practiced, my father would leave the room. And if I practiced for long enough, he would leave the house and walk down the street to the Met Tavern. When I began 6th grade, I started taking violin lessons and group lessons and also playing in the orchestra. And every day when I, with my Coke bottle glasses and my violin in one hand and my Roy Rogers lunch kit in the other, I would start walking to school, and I found that there were some obstacles to achieving my dream. Kids in Butte, Montana did not like violin players. I met my first obstacle on the school playgrounds. Bucky Baumgartner. He started punching me in the shoulder and in the arms, and then he said, "You friggin' fingerless four-eyed fairy with a fiddle, what a frump!" And then he started to punch me again in the arm. And this happened every week, and my arm was black and blue. And then finally I decided it was time for fight or flight, so I chose the ladder and gave him a shove, and off I ran. And he got closer and closer and closer until a block and a half, and then I started to pull away. He never ever caught me. Every night he chased me home from school, but he could never ever catch me. Not on the street and not in my recurring nightmares. One day at orchestra, I had this girl named, I had a crush on her. Her name was Jeannie Given, and she played violin, first violin. I played last violin. And she said, "I just heard that there's going to be a fight at 4 o'clock today in the alley behind the school, and that you're going to fight Bucky Baumgartner." Bucky Baumgartner, oh no, he had me trapped. I could not show up to an all-school fight. My life flashed in front of me, and there I was lying in my coffin holding on to Grandfather Sylvester's violin. "Oh, George, we've lost our angel." "Well, Genevieve, we don't have to listen to the practice anymore." So I walked over to where the crowd was at 4 o'clock. And it sounded like a medieval mob at a public execution. And everyone gathered around. And Bucky and I started to fight, and it was bam, 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 and it was 3 punches to my face, and it was a bloody mess. The fight was over, and I skulked home. When I got up on the back steps of my house, I looked in the window, and there was my mom with her friend Loretta. Oh no, if she found out that I'd been in a fight, she'd be on the phone, and she'd be calling Bucky Baumgartner's mom, she'd call my friends' moms, she'd call the school principal, and every day she'd walk me back and forth to school holding onto my hand and my violin. That was a violation of the Butte Code. Never say what you've been doing, never say what anyone else has been doing. I'd be a stool pigeon. But I had a plan. I picked up my violin case and put it on my shoulder in front of my bloody face. And I walked in the door, right past my mother and Loretta. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Miss Loretta." Walked straight on through, on up to my bedroom. I don't think Mom ever figured that out, because she never ever said anything to me. However, it turns out that now I had no one to talk to. I couldn't tell anyone how afraid I was to carry the violin to school. I was all alone. That summer, I had a friend who had one of those toy 10-hole harmonicas. And I picked it up, and I found that it was really easy to play. And then, as the summer went on, I started to learn the secrets after I paid 25 cents for one of my own. And then the summer went by, and I started school again, 7th grade, and I found my second obstacle. Mousy McGarry. Bam, bam, he went. And he said, "You friggin' fingerless four-eyed fairy with a fiddle, what a frump." Banged me again. I gave him a shove and off I ran. But he could never catch me. He chased me home every night from school. He could never catch me. At orchestra in the spring, Jeannie Given surprised me. I heard there's a fight tonight, 4 o'clock in the alley, and that you are going to be fighting Mousy McGarry. At 4 o'clock, I walked over to the fight. The whole mob was there. And so we started to spar. But then all of a sudden, the crowd was gone. They had moved down the alley. So Mousy and I, sort of like we were buddies, walked down to see what's going on. And there they were, 2 girls, 8th graders. Nancy was the name of one, and Barbara was the other. And Nancy and Barbara were well known. They were reading poetry, first off. But they were also, I got a lot of respect from us boys because one day in class, Nancy had thrown us and our chalk eraser at Barbara. And it had missed, and it lit right next to Miss Stone. And Miss Stone turned around and wanted to know who it was. And Pat, a boy named Pat, ratted them out. They went crazy. And so they assembled a gang of 12 girls. And they waylaid Pat in the alley. And they pantsed him, or de-pantsed is a better word. They took everything, including his shoes, and let him walk home alone. Meanwhile, back at the poetry reading, the 2 girls were reading something that had been ripped out, handwritten, and it was ripped out of a spiral ring notebook. And it was a parody of Fats Domino's I Found My Thrill on Blueberry Hill. And so they were told a story about a young girl, very explicit one, in all graphical detail about how she had found her thrill on Blueberry Hill. For us kids, we'd never heard anything like that. It was a change in our lives where something that was as titillating as this was more important than a school fight. But as soon as it was over, we went back to the fight. Bam, bam, I blocked a couple punches, and then boom, 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 3 punches to the face. And that was it. The fight was over. I went home. That summer, or I should say on my birthday, my father gave me a real harmonica, not a toy one, but a Hohner 64 chromatic. And I can remember when I played the low register and how much I loved it. And I spent the rest of the summer playing this instrument. Well, maybe the rest of my life. When I went to 8th grade, I found a new obstacle. And that obstacle was Spike Stanisic. Spike Stanisic, you F with an F. By that time, I had a reputation and a nickname. And I gave him a shove, and off I ran. And he couldn't catch me. He couldn't catch me. He chased me home every night. And then in the spring, after a snowstorm, I picked up and made a very hard ice ball. And I threw it at my friend Joey Sycott. And it ended up that I hit Spike right in the back. And he turned around with a sneer. And all the kids froze. This was Spike Stanisic, the father of all junkyard dogs. He was the bully of all bullies. I'll see you tonight at 4 o'clock. And so at 4 o'clock, I walked over. The fight started, and bam! I hit him right in the face. Then bam, bam! 2 more times. It turns out that Spike Stanisic had never had to have a fight as the biggest bully in the school. And so there was an anger inside of me that was released, and bam, 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 with an uppercut that knocked him into the trash cans. When I walked to school the next day, I carried my violin with my head held high. I was the school hero. Even Jeannie Given invited me to her birthday party, which turned out to be a great deal until I got there and found out it was me and 10 girls. Unfortunately, my friends never found out about that. During the summer, before I entered high school, I was practicing the violin one day. It hit me. I was never going to be a virtuoso on the violin. Have you ever had that feeling about your lifelong dream? That it really wasn't possible? You came to the point where it just didn't make any sense? I didn't have the talent or the commitment. I had spent more time being chased home from school and practicing the violin. I had spent more time playing my harmonica than practicing the violin. And I compared myself to Jeannie Given. She was the prodigy who played around the state with beautiful tone and beautiful technique. Well, I was still slogging around in first position on the G string. When I joined high school, I went out for the track team, tried out for it, and on the first night, Coach Sweet Dahlberg was there, and he says, "I'm looking for a real man. I'm looking for the last man standing." And he fired the gun. He's had us all in the track. And the idea was to be the last man standing as we went around and around. Well, I went around and around the track, and everybody else dropped out, and I was Sweet Dahlberg's last man standing. It turns out that 3 years of running home from school had finally paid off. When I was a junior, there was an all-school talent show, and Jeannie Given played a beautiful violin sonata, and I followed with this. I got as much applause as Jeannie did. However, Jeannie had a full ride ticket to some fancy school of music, and I had a ticket to nowhere. On May 23rd, 1958, exactly 6 years after my mom gave me this violin, I was standing in Dornblazer Field in Missoula, Montana, for the state championship in the half mile. The gun went off, and 12 of us thin clads went running. And after the first lap, I was in the back of the 12. And then I did something rather stupid. I ran wide around the turn, passing everyone, running at least 5 yards further. And then down the backstretch, I was way in the lead. But they started to catch me when I came to the final corner. And then, as we pulled with 100 yards left, there were 4 of us together. The people in the crowd were screaming. My legs, my arms, my lungs, everything was screaming. But I had been here before. It was just like I was running against Spike and Bucky and Mousy. And so I found within myself enough kick to pull ahead and win the state championship. And with winning that state championship, I got a track scholarship to the university, and that is how my grandfather's violin became my ticket to college.